there's two key concepts, the way I see it, that we need to understand that underpin the ecological approach. The first concept is this idea of repetition without repetition, okay? What I mean by that is that we can repeat the same result of our actions every time, potentially, but we cannot repeat the action precisely every time. So where that comes from, there's like a famous study of a Soviet researcher who was studying blacksmiths using hammers to like make stuff, and going into it, the assumption was that the more skilled the blacksmith, the more consistent the swing of their hammer would be. However, this is not what was found. They found that the more skilled blacksmiths, there would be quite a lot of variation in the path that the hammer would take through the air, but the result that they were achieving, where the hammer was hitting each time, that was where the consistency lay. So what this means for movement skills in general is that it's not possible for us to regurgitate the same exact movement every single time, and so we shouldn't be aiming to replicate that when we're trying to teach stuff, okay? So trying to recreate the exact same drill every time is not as useful as trying to get people achieving the same effect every time and allowing them to self-organize around different solutions to achieve that same result. So the second concept that underpins the ecological approach is this idea of perception and action being coupled. So perception is how we take in information from our environment. The most obvious thing is visual information, but it encompasses all information that we take from the environment. Action is just how we move within the environment. So if we take a grappling example about how perception and action can be coupled, we think about trying to take an underhook when we're on top of someone and they're playing bottom. We obviously have an action of taking the underhook, but we need to be able to perceive the opportunity for us to take that action. If someone's arms are here, I can't take an underhook. If they're out here, I can take an underhook. What about if they're here? It's going to depend, right? And so this is all individual to each person. What is a sound opportunity for me to take an underhook wouldn't be for someone else, and what would be for someone else maybe wouldn't be a good opportunity for me to take an underhook. So we need to get really good at perceiving these opportunities for ourselves, okay? Not for someone else, for ourselves, because they are unique to us. And then on top of that, we have this idea that the way we act affects what we perceive. So we act to perceive, and we perceive to act. So if we take our underhook example, if someone's tight like this and I threaten to flatten them or put my chest on their chest, they're likely to frame against me, okay? This creates more of an opening for an underhook than this does. And that's just a simple example of how my action can affect what I perceive, and we're like taking a specific example when there's something that we're specifically trying to perceive. So I guess this contrasts with the sort of traditional approach to teaching. If we take drilling, for the most part, that's very much focused on action, but there's very little to no perception involved there at all. And there's little to no coupling of those two as an extension of that. So if I just have to practice taking an underhook and knee cutting and pinning someone in side control, but we do the same thing every time, I don't need to perceive anything. I could do it with my eyes closed, my ears shut, like I could have almost no sensory information provided to me, and I could still drill that, which means that there is no coupling going on there. What this then means when we come to take this into the live environment and someone is trying to stop us from taking an underhook and knee cutting past them, is that we're not doing a good job of perceiving the opportunities for us to then take that action, okay? And it goes deeper than that as well. There's a lot more complex coupling that comes out of this, especially when we get more and more skilled. But again, if we're just drilling, we're not really getting any of that into our training sessions. In an ecological approach session, we should be keeping perception and action coupled. So anything where we need to act, we need to also be able to perceive the opportunity for that action first, okay? And beyond that, we need to be able to have some freedom in how we can move our bodies in order to create those opportunities in the first place, okay? So this is what I mean when I say coupling perception and action. I'm going to make a movement, my training partner is going to respond to that movement. I need to perceive what opportunities are then afforded to me by that movement that they're doing, okay? And all of this is coupled. How they move depends on how I move, okay? And this is always going to be different every time, but the better we can get at coupling these two together and finding unique but effective solutions, the more skilled we're going to be. H-E-U-X, hooks. Data Pro hooks, I have no idea how to say that. How can we implement it? This is a great question. So I'm going to assume that this is someone starting from scratch, never tried to teach in this way before, and just wanting to take their first steps into implementing a more ecological style of training. So the first thing that I would say is try and keep everything involving some form of live resistance. So the best way to think about this is try and set your students objectives. So both players are, if we have a top and a bottom player, both people have objectives that they're trying to achieve, okay? And so they're kind of working against each other. This is going to make it way more realistic. And then the next thing you want to think about is think about the effect that you want your students to be able to have on each other, okay? The effect that they have on the environment, but in our sport, really, the environment for the most part is your training partner. So a simple example, if we're working from the standing position and we want to start being able to take people down, one really good way to do that is if we can get our training partner hopping on one leg, we lift their leg off the ground, basically start to hit some form of single leg. This is going to be advantageous for us and disadvantageous for the other person, generally speaking. And this would be a good skill to develop in our students, okay? I'd like my students to be really good at taking their training partner and putting them on one leg, and I'd like them to be really good at denying their training partner from getting them on one leg, okay? And so we could create a game based around this effect that we want them to be able to have and giving our training partner, our students, objectives that they need to achieve. And in that game, it could be one where they both have the same objective. Find a way to get your training partner hopping on one leg. You could play around with the starting positions. Are they starting already connected to the leg, but the leg is planted on the floor, and they need to find ways to lift that leg up off the floor and stay standing themselves? This could be a good objective, okay? So you really need to think about what effect do you want your students to be good at achieving or denying, and then create live games based around those ideas. We had a few questions that are kind of, I think, touching on similar things. We were asked, why is it our sole approach? And a few different questions along the same lines of, can you mix ecological training with drilling or with the traditional approach? And so I guess I'll try my best to answer this. I think drilling in particular is the one aspect of the traditional approach that doesn't really align with the ecological approach. In my mind, or the way that we talk about drilling is where we are using repetition of a movement with the goal of making that movement as consistent as possible. And the underpinning concepts behind the ecological approach tell us that that isn't something that's even possible, let alone something that we should be striving for. So I think the drilling on its own, in particular, isn't really compatible with teaching under the ecological approach. And my personal opinion, based on the stuff that I've read, it's not the most effective way to train at all. Now, there's a lot of other things that happen within the traditional approach that I think are often bundled together with drilling as if that's the only way that you can do it. So the idea that the coach cannot demonstrate a movement unless it's drilling, like that is not true. If I'm setting up a game, I might demonstrate the way I play that game. And in doing so, I will perform what a lot of people would refer to as a technique as I'm doing that, right? I will have some effect on my training partner, and everyone in the class, at least those who are paying attention, will see what I'm doing, and naturally they're going to try to some extent to replicate that. When we teach using the ecological approach, we need to be really mindful about how everything we do as a coach impacts our students' intention and attention, okay? And so if I perform a certain type of solution to the game, the problem that I've set up for them, I need to be aware that that's going to affect the way my students search for solutions for themselves. That could be good, that could be bad. I just need to be aware of it.